trust lost.
Did we know about stopping humanization before it's entered the market? No.
Rot revealed.
You got a lot of people right now who are good, honest people in government, and they can't believe what this administration's doing.
You are the enemy.
I want to know why you were banging on my door with a gun.
It's time to blow the whistle.
Trust in institutions. It's everything. It's part of what makes a country a country. If you forget about America, boil it down to a tiny tribe, someone's in charge, or at least in charge of overseeing the cattle operation. You've got to trust that person. If you think that person is a hopelessly corrupt liar, you either have to replace him or something has to be done to fix that situation. The tribe can't continue to function. You need the cattle. As Americans, we have to be able to trust our institutions, and we can't. But how do we do that? Can you do that? Can I do that? No. So what we need, what we're going to talk about tonight, is whistleblowers, because we have them. Thrilled we have them. We have great ones coming on tonight. We don't have near enough. And here's what I mean by this. I've told you this story before. We're going to rewind. I'm going to tell you it again. The story of Reserve Police Battalion 101. Now, what was that? Who were they? They were in the German army in World War II. Now, I need to explain. Everyone in the German army in World War II was not a Nazi, all right? Now, obviously, a bunch were. When you talk about the Einsatzgruppen and SS types and those guys, there were a bunch of card-carrying Nazis in there, hating Jews, all the evil stuff. But a bunch of guys just happened to be in the German army or love Germany when Hitler takes over and, let's go kill everyone. And they're looking around thinking, okay, let's do it. These guys, Reserve Police Battalion 101, well, not only were they not card-carrying Nazis, they weren't even full-time soldiers. Reserve Police Battalion, what was their job? Whenever the front line, tip of the spear types would take over an area, well, they need to go on and take over other areas. You don't leave your top guys back to guard checkpoints and things like that. So you bring in reservists, guys who are basically civilians with some military training. These are all accountants, lawyers, shop owners, just normal dudes like you. So there was a battalion, 500 of them, in Poland. The SS types had moved on. So these, again, just overweight accountants, no big deal, in uniform. And they were told one day that they had to go into this village and they had to execute all the women. There was a Jewish village. They had to take all the men and march them off, slave labor. And then the women and children, they were going to take them out in the forest and shoot them all in the back of the head. Shoot them all in the back of the head. All right, so that's horrible, right? Now, the story goes, they did it. They ended up doing it. They walked in, these normal people just like you, people like me, and they committed a crime that you could never imagine doing. I could never imagine a child, a woman, crying, screaming, begging, mothers holding on to their children. Can you imagine? Women executed as they held on to their babies. Could you even imagine? What kind of a monster do you have to be? So that's the name. The moral of the story is people will follow orders, right? People will follow orders. And then they went on, after they got done with that village, it messed them up that night. They had nightmares, but eventually they were given orders to do it to another and another and another. By the end of the war, they enjoyed it. But that's not, for me, what has always been the main takeaway. Yes, it's a study of human nature, and we've talked about that a bunch. My part that I always marvel at this part was this. They're given the order, first time, go into that village, kill all those women and children. The commander is torn up by the order. He didn't want to do it, women and children. And he knows his men are not going to want to do it either. So he stands in front of 500 of them, and he tells them, hey, this is optional. Anyone, you won't be punished. Anyone who doesn't want to go into that village and kill women and children, you don't have to, guys. And the story is 10 men of 500 stepped forward and said they didn't want to. And that's the part of the story I always focus on. That's the part of the story that always blows me away, because why was it only 10? There are 500 men there. Again, we're not talking about psycho Nazi types. 500 men there. Why wasn't it 500 saying, no, sir, I won't? That's an unlawful order. And in fact, you better be real careful giving me that order again, sir. There was nothing. Yeah, all right, set aside 500. Okay, you're always going to be some sheep. We couldn't get 200? 300? Half? I mean, we couldn't get anything. We couldn't get 10%. 10 men in 500? I think about this a lot. I think about it a lot when it comes to what we're facing today, because we have these institutions who are utterly destroyed. They're destroyed. You hate them now. You don't trust them. We don't trust them at all. CDC, FBI, all of them. We don't trust them. And I think about the people who are on the inside. Not one or 200. Why aren't they saying something? I want to give credit to Maze Moore, who always does great work, put together this little montage. Do you remember what these monsters did to us during COVID? Where has been the backlash?
But there are a lot of indications right now that are telling us that there is a protection against transmission of the disease. There is no variant that we have identified that escapes the protection of our vaccine.
Against COVID, to come now with a treatment of 90% effectiveness, personally makes me very proud about it.
And we know that the 2 doses of the vaccine offer very limited protection, if any. The 3 doses with a booster, they offer reasonable protection against.
It is necessary a 4th boost right now. The protection that you are getting from the 3rd, it is good enough. Actually quite good for hospitalizations and deaths. It's not that good against infections, but doesn't last very long.
Where are the people from within Pfizer, from within the CDC, from within the FDA? Where are they coming forward? Because what you just witnessed there, that's a crime. That's fraud. You don't get to stand up and say, hey, great news, guys. All you have to do is take my little snake oil pill and you won't get a cold. You won't get a cold. 6 months later, you're going to get a cold, but it won't be bad, I swear. 6 months later, hey, you're going to get a cold. It might be bad if you don't take 2 pills. Gather up, line up for number 2. That's a crime. Where are the people? Where are all the people from within stepping forward? I want to know. Andrew Huff, who's going to be joining us a little later, to his credit, stepping forward.
The reason why I came forward is that I think everyone needed to know the truth. This unfortunate event in history will repeat itself unless we take actions to prevent it from happening again. And if we lie to ourselves about what happened, it'll happen again. If we do not hold those accountable that made the mistakes, this will happen again. And the world deserves to have the truth. The world deserves to have these people held accountable.
They do. Where are all the men to step forward? I'm glad he is. I'm glad we have some tonight. I'm glad we have Kyle Seraphin on the show tonight with the FBI, with what's happening at the FBI. This is one of the things that I marvel at it. I marvel at watching this organization become the Cheka in front of our eyes. They're becoming the KGB in front of our eyes. And I'm always told about all the great men and women on the ground. They're great men and women. Why do we have so few coming forward? And it's why I praise guys like Kyle for being bold enough to step up and speak up and talk about things like this.
The FBI has bought in 100% to the hype of January 6th. They have said it's the biggest investigation they've ever done, bigger than 9/11. To me, that's incredible. Said that. And I had friends that were going to go down there, current agents, active duty, guys that were carrying the badge and the gun. They were going to go down to the rallies, and for just logistical reasons, didn't make it. They were able to retire safely, probably just because of that mishap, because otherwise they would have been under investigation, as far as I can tell. And I know that there are friends in my group,
even though they were exercising their First Amendment right.
I know 2 guys that have been suspended without pay, their security clearance revoked for showing up to listen to the President of the United States
No criminal
speak.
activity whatsoever.
None. And the allegation is absurd, that they were engaging in some sort of obstruction of federal proceeding.
Why aren't there 10,000 Kyles with FBI badges coming forward saying this is what's happening? It's happening right now. Once again, there are 500 men there and 10 are stepping forward. Well, you know what happens at the end of that? Every woman and children in the village still dies because it was 10 instead of 200 or 300 or 500. So we are going to honor and hear from the whistleblowers tonight. You ready for that? Kyle, that one guy you just saw right there, he joins us next.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were motivated?
I don't know, but from what I am told, they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about them.
That doesn't sound very good, does it? Joining me now, one of the real heroes out there, and I genuinely mean this, I don't say that much, Kyle Seraphin. He is an FBI whistleblower, and man, I wish we had about 10 to 20 more thousand just like this guy exposing what's going on. Kyle, before we get into you and your risks and why you stepped away, maybe as someone who's been on the inside, you can explain what are these 6 ways from Sunday the FBI can get back at you?
Well, I think we've seen some of them, and I don't know exactly what Senator Schumer was referencing because he's an independent human being and I'm not inside of his head. But, we've seen some of the things that have gone on when it comes to the pro-life activists. We've seen, members of Trump's circle, whether it be in or outer, taking the brunt of FBI search warrants. And so we can all speculate on what it is. Like I said, I'm not part of any of those cases, so there may be really good probable cause that justifies it, but the optics are terrible.
Okay, Kyle, tell us who you are, background about yourself, what's your current role?
Sure. My name is Kyle Seraphin. I am an indefinitely suspended FBI agent. I did about 6 years with the FBI on the payroll. On June 1st of this year, I was suspended indefinitely when they pulled my clearance. And I'm a father of 3. That's the first most important thing. I'm a confirmed Catholic. I'm a husband. And so, I'm a husband and father first, a citizen second, FBI agent distant third, and probably not for much longer, I imagine.
What'd you do to get suspended? You stealing paper clips from the office or something?
It was even worse than that. I was standing up for the Second Amendment, which I think is probably a death knell in this current administration. I was out in the desert in New Mexico, where there's a lot of open and public land. I was actually on private land adjacent to the federal government's hundreds of thousands of acres of national monument space. And I was doing some shooting training. I had a local cop join it. He was self-dispatched. He came out to talk to me. We had about a 3.5-minute interaction that was all captured on body camera. And he went away, and the first thing he said when he got back on his radio was 10-8, no report, which tells us that it was exactly what it was. He led the conversation by saying he didn't know if we were in the city or the county or whether or not he had any jurisdiction over what was going on, and told me he didn't know the state law governing our interaction as well. So I politely kind of schooled him up a little bit, told him I was going to continue doing what I was doing. I was 900 yards away from the outer building of a high school that was well off in the other direction. And so that was the only thing we really discussed that was of substance, but under state law, it didn't matter. And I was accused of being impolite or unprofessional to a police officer. And so I was removed from my office for that.
All right. You knew the risks of speaking out after you were suspended, yet you're speaking out anyway. Why?
I think I'm speaking out because I watched a lot of things go wrong in a lot of different places. And I know that the most common conversation that any 2 FBI agents are going to have when they sit down, or any 3 over a beer or a whiskey or whatever it may be, is going to be about what's wrong with the Bureau, how do we fix it? And none of that ever gets public. There's a lack of transparency, and there's a belief that everybody in the Bureau is in lockstep with what's going on in the Bureau. And it's done like that by design. I mean, that's the way that the FBI sort of indoctrinates people, because the consequences for speaking out are that you lose your paycheck, you lose the pension, you lose the medical benefits, you're out there on your own. And then you also have to contend with the force of the federal government, which may or not operate in an honest or judicious way against you. And so those are serious consequences. Most people don't want to face those things down. And, I was in a position where I got backed up against the wall between the COVID mandates and seeing what they had done with the memo about the threat tags that were coming out. and they were going to look into parents at school board meetings. And I followed too many pieces of news. I watched what happened in 2020 and 2021, and by the end of 2021, that was the end of it for me. Like, I wasn't going to hear any more of it, and they walked me out in 2022. The first thing that I thought of was this story needs to be public, and I'm probably never going to work for the FBI again. That's what my attorneys told me. They said under no circumstances they're going to let you out. So what you do next is up to you. And they sort of advised against doing this because they thought that it would just be personally very difficult for me. And I've had members of Congress, staffers come and say the same thing. They were concerned for me, but they were happy that I did it.
Okay, what are these conversations you and another FBI agent or two would have over a glass of whiskey on a Friday night that we don't ever get to hear? What do they say?
So a lot of people talk about how the FBI, they really lost focus. And they lost focus after 9/11. So I think the Bureau got the wrong message. This is the thing that I've heard continuously. I've heard people tell me that the FBI getting the domestic intelligence mission after 9/11 was like a dog chasing a car and finally catching up with the hubcaps and then trying to figure out what to do with this car. There was not a great plan, and it's very difficult to imagine having an excellent law enforcement and intelligence agency in one, at least one that obeys the Constitution. It's always going to run up against a lot of problems because the purpose of intelligence is for information. The cycle is about information. It feeds in information and it puts out other information that's been analyzed. That is not what criminal investigations are about. They're about determining who has been involved in federal crimes and then prosecuting them through an adversarial process, giving them their say in court. There's an entire linear progression of this. But when you look at intelligence, it's a circular diagram. And so that's the discussion that most of us would have. How did it die? When did it die? Is it fatal? Can it be recovered? And is there a way that we can uphold the oath and still do some of the things that are being asked of us, and what those lines look like? Most people try to figure out what that red line is they're not going to cross.
Okay, can it be saved? It doesn't look, I'm on the outside, you're on the inside. From the outside, to me, it does not look like an organization that can be salvaged. That doesn't mean there aren't great people, but if all the leadership at the top is crap, then it doesn't do me any good because there are good field agents. Can it be saved?
It's a question that I don't know that I can answer definitively. I know a lot of people should be weighing in. I'd like to know what the retired agents that had 2 decades and sometimes 3 decades to consider it, what they have to say about it, because they're going to be the ones who are in really good position. What I'll say is this, from my position, and I'm actually more on the outside now, just like you, although I have many friends who are in, I think the path is very, very narrow, and it continues to narrow as time goes on. It just has to be done correctly. There has to be significant oversight. We need to really have the Bureau prioritize the protection of constitutional rights of the American citizens, and that means on both sides of the aisle. I've never registered for a political party until very, very recently. Like just a couple of months ago was the first time I ever registered in about 22 years that I've been a voter. And so I don't feel strongly about any of the parties doing it right. I think they need to. That's their obligation. I think both of them, it should be bipartisan, and everybody should want a clean and an apolitical FBI. And I know that's what all the retired folks think, and I know that's what most of the people who work within the Bureau think as well.
Okay. The leadership of the FBI, we're talking about the bad guys at this point in time. Not all of them, obviously, but the ones you see on TV all the time. They don't appear, they're not conducting themselves as if they're nervous in any way about any coming oversight. That's one of the things that floors me. They'll do something outrageous, like school board parents, what they did. And there's all this outrage, and they don't miss a beat. Next day, they're kicking in the door of some guy who was reading Bible verses at an abortion clinic. They don't miss a beat. They just keep going and going and going and going. Do they see themselves as being significantly more powerful than Congress? Because that's how they act.
From this one, I'm looking from the outside as well, and I agree with you. The optics of it are absolutely catastrophic. The minute that something comes up and then you see that it looks like they're hitting the gas pedal when they should be hitting the brakes, that there should be a moment of pause and maybe consider, hey, how does this look? It looks like we're acting in a partisan way. If that's what if we're not doing that, we got to kind of realign the priorities and maybe push some of these things back. I tend to agree. I don't understand how people could operate like that without thinking there's going to be some oversight. We we talk about abortion clinics and enforcement of the FACE Act, which is 18 U.S.C. 248. And, I read it pretty frequently. I have a bunch of times over the last week or two. And there's two halves to the FACE Act. That statute actually includes, the same penalties and the same issues for people that are blocking access to a church or a place of religious worship in violation of the First Amendment. And so there's another side of it, but we're not seeing anybody that was in San Francisco blocking the Catholic churches there or marching in through and interrupting mass, which I did see the videos of, and I don't see those people getting federal cases brought against them. Maybe they will in 2 years, but that's really not the way that it's looking in a good way for the Bureau. It looks terrible.
What an ugly bit of business. Kyle, thank you for what you're doing, man. Please keep going.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the time, Jesse.
Be good. We'll be back.
Don't miss Jesse Kelly Breaks History. Che Guevara, the latest episode of a new series available now exclusively for First TV supporters. Visit the First TV app or thefirsttv.com to subscribe and start watching today.